Joining us now is Republican Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who opposes the tariffs. Good to see you, Senator.
Morning, Chris. How you doing?
All right, first let's deal with the, I'm doing well, thank you. First let's deal with the politics. You wrote a letter, he doesn't care. How does that make you feel as a GOP senator?
Well, listen, I don't expect anybody to agree with me 100% of the time. So, on trade, there's obviously a wide divide within this country and between individuals. So it doesn't surprise me. President Trump has had this position literally for decades. But I come from a manufacturing background. I've exported product to 20, 25 different countries around the world. I understand global supply chains, and I just view this as potentially, if it's widespread, if it's targeted toward China, depending on how it's tailored, I mean, I have a problem with it, because that is really where the root cause of the problem is, the gross oversupply within China,
right,
and their trade abuses. But a generalized tariff that would actually harm allies, harm American consumers, by the way, harm American workers that use steel in production, hurting their competitive nature in global markets as well. I'm opposed to that.
All right, so there are two obstacles here, and we should discuss them both. The first one is, whom is he helping? Okay, the promise is attractive to his base and to workers in general. You're going to make it better for us. We're going to have more jobs. But is that true when you have so many more workers, literally exponentially more, affected because of their use of these materials than the workers involved in the manufacture of the materials?
Well, sure. Well, one study after President Bush tried to do this in 2002 said that there are about 200,000 jobs lost in steel-using industries. You were talking about somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5 million workers in industries, manufacturers that utilize steel versus probably under 150,000 in steel mills. And so you really have to wonder what would the increased prices do even for those workers in those steel mills. Maybe a couple mills might open up, maybe a few more jobs might be created, but you're literally risking hundreds of thousands of jobs in all the other industries that utilize steel. Their costs are going to increase, their products are going to be less competitive on global markets, and oh, by the way, American consumers will pay higher prices, as will those steel workers, for higher priced goods because the raw materials increased.
So if it's that obvious on an economic level, you got to ask, why is he doing it anyway? Impulsivity aside, do you really think that he might be just loading the deck for a trip to Pennsylvania for a special election in one congressional district?
I really can't answer that. I do know it's actually very disappointing that free and fair trade is not politically popular. I don't understand it myself, again, having been in manufacturing, participated in global markets, but there's been a fair amount of demagoguery on all sides of the aisle on this issue. And so the American public, in general, does not support free and fair trade, and I think that's unfortunate. I think it's just an incorrect economic position to take.
The second obstacle is, this is not power derived from his seat. This is power given to him by Congress back in the 60s. There is a threshold that the president has to make the case that it is a matter of national security interest. Do you believe that threshold is met?
I don't believe so. The figures I've seen, the Defense Department uses about 3% of American-produced steel. Our largest supplier, foreign supplier, steel is Canada. I'm pretty confident that Canada is a very solid ally of ours, a friend of America. So I don't believe it really meets that national security threshold at all.
And now their latest move may work against them in the White House. Now they're saying, first Pete Navarro said, I don't know how well you know him, but he was somewhat of a nondescript character in this White House until this issue came up and Gary Cohn got squeezed out over it. Now Navarro seems to be driving the bus on this, but that's politics. He said no exemptions, can't make exemptions, sends the wrong signal when you have any exemptions. Now they're saying there will be exemptions, and it's probably Canada and Mexico, and that's because of forcing the hand on NAFTA. But if it's about NAFTA, then how is it about national security?
Well, being the senator from Wisconsin, what I do know about NAFTA is that Wisconsin actually has a trade surplus with both Canada and Mexico. And one thing that's kind of lost in this whole conversation when we talk about trade deficits, I would much rather export $2.3 trillion and have a trade deficit than have a trade surplus and only export $1 trillion. As well as the fact in the private sector, suppliers treat customers really well. America, we are the world's largest market, the world's biggest customer. And so our suppliers, other countries that import into our country, really ought to treat us well, and they do. And so our trade posture can really be an effective foreign policy tool, do an awful lot of good. We can wield an awful lot of influence because of that. And again, if we start engaging in trade wars, I just don't believe anybody wins a trade war, quite honestly. There may be people that are harmed less maybe America's in a better position. But I just think there's so much collateral damage. I think it's a very risky and dangerous strategy.